Our session today, as you all know, is titled You Can't Be Serious, featuring Shubha Mudgal, Aatish Taseer, and Bickram Ghosh on whether forums for literature and classical music are shrinking in India. It is pointless for me to try and introduce Shubha Mudgal to you, as it is trying to introduce Bickram Ghosh in Kolkata. So I'll tell you a bit about Aatish Taseer, who is perhaps the least familiar to us as readers in Calcutta. Aatish Taseer is a British-born writer and journalist. He has worked as a reporter for Time magazine and has written for the Sunday Times, the Sunday Telegraph, the Financial Times, Prospect, TAR magazine, and Esquire. He is the author of Stranger to History, A Son's Journey Through Islamic Lands, which has been translated into more than 14 languages. Manto, Selected Stories, translated from the original Urdu. Noon, The Temple Goers, which was shortlisted for the 2010 Costa First Novel Award, and most recently, The Way Things Were. May I now invite Shubhaji, Pandit Bickram Ghosh, and Aatish Taseer onto the stage.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is a wonderful opportunity to discuss some issues which are really important, which are close to, I'm sure, all our hearts. And this morning, we have two people extremely prominent in their respective fields. Shubhaji, of course, besides the fact that all of you know her and everybody knows her, the fact is that she's been very, very instrumental in a lot of change over the last many years now, and she has inspired us to do many things that she started. Aatish, I've just met, but of course, you've created quite a stir so with your writing. And it was interesting to hear him tell somebody who asked for autograph, he said, please buy my book, I'll autograph it. So I think that's the right way to do it. I too shall carry tablas in the future. All right, so where's the sound person? I mean, being a musical person, we always look for the sound man. Can we have a little more on the monitors here so that we can hear a little clearly? Hello? Hello? Yeah, that's fine. All right, so you can't be serious. That's the subject of the discussion this morning. The byline is, how can forums for serious art be protected? The first question I'd like to ask both of you, is there anything called serious art and non-serious art? Seriously speaking, is there anything called serious or non-serious art? Shubhaji, please. Yeah. Can you give us a little more volume, please, here? I mean, it's nice. It is on, but it's like really faint.
Well, I think I've always, I've been against hierarchies, and I've been against categorizations and labels. I think they do better in a music store where you have to look for a particular kind of music. So I wouldn't subscribe to this view of serious art and non-serious art. I think the impulse with which people make art can be of any kind, and each time, if it comes from the heart, it has to be serious for them, even if it's about if it describes something that perhaps brings a lot of chuckles and giggles and laughter.
Right. Also, I think that to add to that, what's true of probably really even more true in your world than in mine, although it's deeply valid in writing as well, is that there's there's an amazingly important relationship between what you might describe as folk literature or folk art or whatever, and high literature. I mean, Shakespeare comes straight out of the tradition of bards, of minstrels. In India, that tradition is alive all around us. So as much as we talk about the classical and the serious and the formal, they take vitality from each other, you know. So it would never be serious to the exclusion of the thing that's like it's actually its lifeblood.
I think Shubhaji and Aatish, I think that the problem with especially the way we promote classical music, Indian classical music especially, I think this is the problem. A lot of people think it's too serious to come and attend, because it's probably, many people think it's not something which is about fun. It's not something which is about entertainment. But I think it's so wrong, because some of the concerts I grew up on, classical music concerts, were so entertaining that I still remember them more than many movies I saw. I mean, for example, Gopi Krishan ji with Kishan Maharaj ji, absolutely scintillating concert. So classical music has a lot of aspects to it which are entertainment, which are fun. But I think somehow we think it's serious, and a lot of people nowadays tend to shy away a little bit from serious. Do you endorse that view, or do you have another view?
No, I would say that I think it's about the current trend to equate art with the entertainment industry, really speaking. So I think, the entertainer's work is certainly an art. It is very difficult to entertain, and I think it's a gift if you can entertain people. But all art cannot and is not entertaining. So I think what we need perhaps to look at is the fact that we must respect diversity, even in the arts. And so there may be some kinds of music that make people get up and start dancing, and that's wonderful. But there may be other kinds of music which may provoke a lot of thought and may not be the same kind of music that you would dance to or tap your toes to. But I think that respect for diversity, and I think the respect, that whole idea of treating any kind of art as being part of entertainment and being part of an industry, the moment that happens, I think there are problems, because there are certain kinds of music which are never going to be part of the mainstream music industry. And that is why today, much like what happened in cinema in India, that there was once parallel cinema, what we call parallel cinema. Whether that's a correct term or not, I don't know, but I wouldn't always subscribe to that. But I think the idea of people independently producing their own work in music and finding listeners for it. The reason for it having come about is because the mainstream music industry in India decided that this kind of music and that kind of music will reach a lot of people. For example, those crazy things about how classical music will only reach people above their 40s. I mean, are all people above their 40s exactly the same? Are their preferences exactly the same? You have a concert of rock music and you find people in their 60s and 70s going there and being the first people to buy their tickets. And you go to a classical music concert and you find all kinds of people. You have young kids who come up to you and say, I'm learning music. You have older people who've listened to the great masters. So I think this whole idea of sort of dumbing down everything and saying this reaches this category, I think that's what is objectionable.
And also, like, I feel a lot of the systems that were in place that introduce people in a very natural, organic way to what we would call serious art have broken down. So you, for instance, I was in Banaras during the election, writing and meeting a lot of pundits, and he said, you know, people say कि Sanskrit murda zaban hai. He said, in our house we used to recite shloks. Malviya ji aate the, hum shlok sunate the. He said, I grew up with the sound of it, and obviously on some level, and you see this still very successful in the West, people have, for a certain kind of art form, or I think probably even very true of music, it has to enter your soul at quite a young age. And if you insulate people and then suddenly send them to, I don't know, some kind of school where they have to learn this stuff as an act of piety, they're not going to respond to it. If it was, you know, there are very organic ways, and they used to exist in India. And somehow this little transfer we've made to some kind of modern existence, it's cut a lot of that out, and there hasn't been a successful way to bring it back.
I would like to distinguish between entertainment and engagement. I think we often do. If we say that, Shubhaji, if like you said, that if we say that all art doesn't need to be entertaining, then I would feel that all art, even if it doesn't need to be entertaining in the very broad sense of the word, but it does need to be engaging. So I think if it engages us, be it literature, be it music, then it gives us something. It gives our soul fodder. It gives us something which is not very easily definable. We can't define it very easily, but it does give us something which makes us feel better. And I think somehow a lot of people are here nowadays think that entertainment is the only form of engagement, if I distinguish between the two. Because if we are singing and dancing, and if we're, more dancing than singing really nowadays, but if we're dancing a lot, then we must be really entertained. Or if we have popcorn in our hands, then we are entertained. You know, that kind of stringent view. But if we were to move away from there and think, if I'm reading a book, or if I'm reading a paper, or if I'm reading an article, and it's engaging me, then that is a form of entertainment. Because if we can broadly put it under one umbrella and not say that we're the guys who don't entertain but engage, and they're the guys who entertain, then we probably are again segregating people into groups. So that's kind of my broad view on it. We will throw questions open to the audience towards the end of the session. But delving a little more into the subject at hand, it seems today that music, art, dance, and literature are all struggling to find platforms in an increasingly Bollywoodized cultural space. India, for all its huge artistic diversity, seems to be ruled in a way by Bollywood which limits opportunities for independent growth. Bollywood is where all the money and fame lies, and everybody gravitates towards Bollywood. I mean, a lot of people do, thereby seriously limiting the possibilities of expanding the horizons of artistic forms. Isn't that ironic? That especially for music, with such a richness of folk, classical, and experimental genres, the main music industry is just an offshoot of a cinematic medium. The biggest music industry that we have in terms of what monies are churned out, how many people are engaged, is an offshoot of a cinematic medium. The biggest stars of music are the Bollywood singers, and yet their popularity too depends on the stars they're singing for. I find the scenario to be deeply ironic. Shubhaji, even if we look at the popular genre of musicians in the West, say Michael Jackson or Whitney Houston or whoever we think of, they did not become big stars singing for movies. They created independent music. Though in the popular forms, they created independent music. And then that music was imbibed in film, licensed for film. That is a scenario which puts the musician on par with the medium of cinema. But in our country, we find that the biggest musical stars, especially today, much more today than before. There was a time, of course, when Pandit Ravi Shankar was much bigger a star than many of the big movie stars. But nowadays, we find that the big stars of music are the ones who are singing for film.
Yeah, and Bikram, you should bring in script writing. Same problem.
Yeah, I was just going to go to that issue as well. So what is it? Why don't you answer that, Aatish? What is it that is wrong with the system, and how do you feel that it can change, or can it change at all? Do we see something changing in the near future, or is it just going to be this way for the next 10, 15 years? Aatish?
Look, I feel that I don't want to say anything that I don't want to sound for even a moment like I'm one of those people who like resents Bollywood. I think Bollywood is like an amazingly vital, and the way that it's come together, it's one of the most original forms of like Indian expression that there are. You know, you feel that it does in some way perform the function of that folk art used to do. That it seems like it's and it's original. It's something that you know, for a long time people described it as musicals. They described it as this, and actually it broke those categorizations and remained what it was. And it's so I don't want to speak in that respect. I feel that the kind of scorched earth policy that Bollywood suddenly has in relation to other arts is something new. I mean, there was a time my grandfather was an Urdu poet. He had a very Sadat Hasan Manto, of course, who I've translated. These people had a very a very successful relationship with the movies. They wrote for the films. It was a way for a poet to stay alive. It didn't mean that the poet was swallowed up by Bollywood. He remained who he was. So this particularly modern scenario in which there's Bollywood and nothing else, and it's sort of like a black hole in which like musicians and writers disappear. I'm not sure what the cause for it is, but we shouldn't think of it as historically having always been what Bollywood was, you know?
Yeah, I agree with you there, because I don't think it was like this even 20, 30 years back.
The Progressive Writers Association and members like Sahir Rudhyanvi and Majroo Sultanpuri and Kaifi Sahab all wrote for films. Absolutely. And also brought, I mean, interestingly, they also brought their values and principles and beliefs into the work that they wrote for films.
Yeah.
So I don't think that I agree that this really shouldn't be a case of sort of Bollywood against the rest of the arts. But I think that remember that the moment that is the only industry as such.
Exactly,
and
that's what
why,
I was getting to, yeah.
One of the, I mean, I have no ready formulae and solutions to give, but I think one of the reasons why other forms of music and their voices are not heard so prominently